All right, recording has started, and this is the March 6th, 2025 Crossplane community meeting. Let me go ahead and grab a link to the agenda document and drop that into the Zoom chat right now. So if folks aren't already in the agenda document, you can do so now. And there's plenty of space to add any sort of topics or other agenda items that folks want to explore. So let's get right on into it. The most recent occurrence then for major major milestone was since we talked last, was the 1.19 Crossplane release. We also did a series of patch releases for that too. We did a 1.18.3 and 1.17.5. Thanks again to Mark, who was our release manager and who ran the release process this time. Definitely appreciate that effort. So let's look real quickly then at 1.19 and just kind of confirm what was in there and the notable things. All right. So kind of the theme here was maturing some of our very useful and popular APIs and features of the Crossplane project. So for example, the usage API, which tracks resource usage and dependencies between resources and make sure that they're protected and not deleted too early, et cetera, that was matured and promoted to beta. So it is now on by default, and you don't have to set a feature flag or anything to use it. It will be there by default and available. And then we also matured the server-side apply functionality for claims. And so now this is also matured to beta. It's on by default, and it makes life in general much, much better for everybody. But I do want to call out again, so just folks are aware that if anyone was relying on previous bugs, like incorrect behavior within information from a claim being synced down to its composite resource, if somebody was relying, I don't think that's the case, but if somebody was relying on that behavior, then this is considered a breaking change for them. But I think overall, this makes things work as intended, and it is a bug fix from that perspective. But something to note when you upgrade to 1.19. We also had a couple of nice community investments as well too. So a long-standing PR to be able to customize the ports for Crossplane and providers. Which really works nicely if you're running on scenarios where you need to use host networking between, let's say, the master nodes and to connect master nodes and worker nodes. So that works, and it needs some more work to be able to roll it out to more providers. But the core Crossplane changes are there, and you can run Crossplane with configurable ports, and that all works by itself. So thanks for continuing to drive that feature and get it in. That was very much appreciated for sure. All right. So those are the highlights from 1.19, basically. The patch releases were more dependency updates, security updates, that sort of thing. So nothing major, I think, to go into those. So basically, let me correct this. This is not updated yet. Basically, we've started the 1.20 milestone now, right? There are releases and milestones in Crossplane are quarterly. So it'll be about 3 months from the last release until the next release. Currently on the community calendar, that's early May. So a couple more months, actually exactly 2 months-ish, because we'll be quality driven and release driven and not date driven, but you can expect another Crossplane release within a couple of months here, basically. So there's a bunch of interesting stuff, I think, on the 1.20 roadmap and milestone. I've kind of called those out here in this section here of like, what are the big things going on in 1.20? I think it's a bit aggressive, as usual for most milestones within Crossplane. But these are sort of the high-level areas of investment that we believe are important to make. We're making progress on V2, and we have a whole section dedicated to that later on, so we'll talk about that then. But then otherwise, though, the change logs feature was put into Crossplane runtime kind of a while ago. I think it was a couple milestones ago now, maybe 1.17, and it has yet to be rolled out to provider ecosystem, so it's not really usable. So this is identified as like high priority still to get this feature out to people's hands so people can audit and keep track of everything that the provider is doing and why it's doing it to resources out in the cloud. Deployment runtime config has a couple of bugs in it and needs to be matured. So it's basically what everybody uses to configure providers when they install them. So maturing that and getting it to GA state stability and feature complete there is going to be really important. I don't think there's any breaking changes or anything like that I'm aware of. It's just more maturing it, bug fixing it, and calling it GA. Real-time compositions. People would love to be able to use this in its current alpha state. It's not super useful. It does have some weird timing, race condition related issues that make it fairly unreliable, unfortunately. So we want to continue investing in that and really help out performance of, you make a change to the composition or to a claim or whatever, and it rapidly propagates through the system, and resources get updated. So that would be really nice to have there. And then continuing to invest in our high level metrics. There's a bunch of useful metrics for managed resources and core crossplane stuff. Ezgi did a great job with that in 1.16, I think. But something that continues to get requests, and it's not exactly clear how we're going to do this, but lots of people have been requesting it still, is metrics and insight into higher levels, like at claims, basically. So that's highly requested, and we hope to invest in that this milestone as well. Other maintainers on the call, is there anything that I missed or anything that you're aware of that you want to call out in addition? Bob, maybe there's anything I missed?
I don't think so. There's some other stuff that I was hoping to get to, but there's no way I'm going to get to it. So
I appreciate your realism.
unfortunately, life gets in the way. So,
Eric, you got your hand up.
Hey guys, Eric Hicks. I'm over at Sumo Logic. Just wanted to say I'll look into what I got to do to be one of the maintainers on the Go side. Happy to accelerate some of these like feature requests, for Crossplane, since we're using it pretty extensively now over at Sumo Logic. So yeah, just wanted to kind of give a brief intro and say that definitely like to start contributing.
That's awesome, Eric. Well, like, welcome to you for sure, and thanks for introducing yourself and your enthusiasm too, man. Definitely appreciate it. If you we have a contributing guide for getting started and where help is needed and stuff like that. That's
Awesome.
You go to Core Crossplane, it's in the contributing folder, it's right there, easy to find. But if you have other questions after that, and you want to kind of get more involved or discuss stuff, like, feel free to ping me, and happy to chat and explore and stuff, because that's great to have more people getting involved, dude.
Awesome. Thanks, Jared.
Very cool. All right, awesome. All right, let's keep on moving here. Thank you, Fatih, for adding in a number of recent provider updates here. A lot of, man, it's been said before, but I feel like there's a new Golang dependency CVE that comes out every week. So those providers are continuing to get patched and making sure that security vulnerabilities are and our dependencies are dealt with. There has not been any reported CVEs or vulnerabilities in the provider logic itself. It's always in the dependencies, but we're staying on top of that, getting new versions out there, making sure that we're trying to keep those up to date there. And thank you, Fatih, for a lot of your efforts on those specifically. If folks have other recent provider updates or releases, feel free to drop them in the doc here, and so that they're included, and folks can see them there. All right. So let's move on to the community topics section here. So a couple of these resources here about like community extension projects and like governance updating for Crossplane and all that stuff, which we're specifically talking about here, so we'll skip that. But some other useful stuff about like kind of like a run through of GitOps and Crossplane, and someone's perspective on that you can check out. So I think I missed a whole bunch of other content around the ecosystem this time, so apologies for that. But if folks have articles, blog posts, videos, etc., they want to add to this list, please do, because it's a good place to keep tracking it. All right, and then once again, the KubeCon treadmill continues to run. We are less than a month away from KubeCon in London. This one's sneaking. I feel like this one's sneaking up on us here quickly. So a couple notes from that. I have a link here for talks about Crossplane, people mentioning it, so you can add those to your schedule. And then we're also throwing another party with the folks from Diagrid and Dapper. I should add that in there as well. Dapper. We did that in Salt Lake City, and we had an awesome time and got to meet a bunch of great people from the community as well. So it's kind of like a similar theme there of like an arcade gaming place that has a bunch of fun stuff to do. Come party with us in London, and if you're fortunate enough to be there in person. And we're looking to have another really good time there and make some new relationships. Again, Simpsons round 2. Yes, Mark, exactly. That was the highlight of my entire KubeCon. Last time is beating the Simpsons arcade game. So we'll find something like that in London as well. And if folks are going to be in London, yeah, feel free to reach out. We'll have the Crossplane booth. We'll have a couple of different Crossplane talks. We have the Lightning talk. We've got the maintainer track talk. So a lot of stuff going on, and it's always useful to make the most of KubeCon time in person. So hope to see you all there. Let's say, okay. I wanted to call out, so in the SIG Docs channel, there's a little bit more life in activity going on there. Craig wanted to drive some brainstorming and discussion there about how to continue improving the Crossplane docs. And, as things continue to mature and the experience continues to, evolve and be what it is today in modern Crossplane, there's probably some things that are missing from the docs that we haven't taken the time to make sure are updated and well documented there. So there is an active discussion going on right now in Crossplane Slack on the SIG Docs channel. I'll put a link to the channel there and a link to the discussion specifically. There's a bunch of good ideas, and some people are bringing some passion to that about how to continue improving things. So if you want to get involved, follow that link, go there, and there's opportunities here and specific ideas for continuing to improve the Crossplane docs. All right. And Eric, you're mentioning a chat here for documentation about building for custom providers is not working well right now.
Yeah, if you're not using like buildx, what the build steps are that get generated, they're all buildx, and if you're not using that for Docker, it can be extremely painful on that side of things. So yeah, that's probably something I'd want to contribute to on the documentation side is just, some generation that doesn't require that, because for, a fair amount of pipelines, those pipelines may not be supporting that. And if, you're creating, like in our case, a custom provider that we're integrating into our pipelines, if those pipelines aren't, currently using, buildx, in their workers, that could be an issue. Not to say that, you couldn't, create workers that have that installed or update your workers for that, but just something that became kind of painful, and didn't work immediately out of the box.
Interesting, Eric. And I think this is a good example of something that, I've never seen myself personally, right? Because all the systems I've used in the pipelines and everything like have that as a tool. So I just kind of take it for granted. So having like a variety of experiences and environments and different availability of tools in the ecosystem there helps a lot for folks to be able to like, hey, this is the experience we had. This is either a contribution to fix it or make it more robust, or documentation to help people kind of work in that environment as well. This is certainly appreciated. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, no worries.
Cool. All right. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about this next item here. So this is an outcome of our ongoing graduation efforts with the CNCF for the Crossplane project. So we have taken a step here to have a more formal definition for what we call community extension projects, which is also understood as everything in the Crossplane contrib organization. At the current count, there are 91 different projects in that repo that are active and public and everything. So there is a bunch of variety of extensions to Crossplane, and that ecosystem is pretty vibrant. But there is some need to have some more consistency and have some more formal definition of what it means to be a project there. Basically, a sub project of Crossplane, and what policies and rules need to be followed for that. So we wrote a blog post about it. You can check out there. but basically the steering committee took the time to update the governance to clearly spell out, what are these community extension projects, what's the life cycle they should follow, and what do what do all of these extensions need to do to be in compliance with the policies that we've defined here. So some things that I think will be nice. I think this is going to be very good for the community. It's going to take a little bit of effort for all the maintainers to kind of take the steps to get their projects into good standing with this, but we're working together as a community, as an ecosystem to make that happen. But basically this is kind of ensuring that all the projects are going to be healthy. Like if they're, we've had a problem with that where over time, if maintainers move on to other things or there's not a lot of activity for a project, we haven't done a good job of keeping up with those and archiving them or being realistic about the current state of them. So we have some more formal definitions for that now, and policy to archive as necessary. And then also, I think will be really good for the community too is some consistency or some specific policy of publishing builds of these and releases of these extensions to a community neutral registry that the entire Crossplane community will use now. Keeping the maintainer list up to date so people know who the maintainers are. A bunch of policies that will basically help projects be healthy, sustainable, and to keep the ecosystem fair as well too. I know there's a lot of maintainers that are affected by this, and so we've created a general discussion here in the Crossplane.org repo where folks can, if they have questions, they can get them answered there in one single place so that 91 different project maintainers have a single place to look at. And there's a lot of ongoing discussion there already. So we're kind of like working together to make sure that everyone can kind of make progress on all of this stuff. There are reusable like workflows and things that people can take advantage of. So everyone doesn't have to do this all from scratch, obviously. But making sure that everyone's getting the answers they need and making these changes here is the primary goal right now. And then the overall healthy ecosystem for the long term is what will be the impact of that. Any questions right now in this forum about that? Or Bob, did I miss anything from a steering committee perspective?
No, I don't think so. I mean, maybe the impact of publishing, certainly publishing the Crossplane contrib providers to GHCR kind of resolve some of the issues with the announcement from Upbound in terms of access to the Upbound providers. So maybe that would just be something to emphasize. Those those images now will be the community-based images will be on GHCR. Obviously, Upbound will continue to maintain their own providers, and they have control over that. So,
yeah, that's a super good point, Bob, and fellow steering committee member. Oh, and congratulations as well for being reelected to the steering committee. I forgot to mention that here. I should have mentioned that too. But congratulations to you and Brian. But yeah, that's a really good point, and that's kind of a large component of the fair ecosystem aspect here, right? That all of the community extensions can be accessed by the community in a neutral way, and without obstacles there. That's an important part of that for sure. All right. So if folks have questions, go to that discussion on the Crossplane.org repo, and we'll talk more about it. All right, updates on V2 stuff. So we've talked the last couple community meetings, I think, about progress on a proposal for a V2 of Crossplane, what that looks like. There's a link to the proposal there in the agenda doc, and let's see. Let's do a real quick recap of that. A big goal here for a V2 of Crossplane is to make Crossplane easier to use for not only infrastructure, but for application modeling and deploying and managing applications as well. Applications tend to be namespaced, first off. And they tend to use arbitrary resources like Kubernetes resources deployments and all these things that are outside of Crossplane specific extensions, right? So those two things there make it fairly awkward to use Crossplane at the application level as well. And so that's a huge part of the V2 proposal is, using namespaced resources for most everything. Managed resources would become namespaced. And then also being able to, with the composition engine, which is pretty powerful in Crossplane, but it's really focused and kind of only lets you compose Crossplane stuff specifically. Now it would let you compose anything or any arbitrary resource as well. So it becomes all of a sudden then with these changes, it becomes much easier to, cool, yeah, I can work with infrastructure, but I can work at the application level to model dependencies and services and all these things as well too, and have that in a nice, consistent experience. This still has all the benefits of, composing together resources, exposing an abstraction for them, all that great stuff. It now works for infrastructure and applications more smoothly now. That's the goal. There's a lot of discussion in the proposal there. It's been great to see people talking about it. And so Nick and I and I think Nick has been pretty sick this week, and he's, bless his heart, has been going pretty hard still nonetheless, but I don't think he's at this meeting, and that's great. We need his rest. But I could speak to it. So Nick and I have been making progress on a proof of concept here. Let's be honest, Nick has done most of the work, and I'm getting involved more recently. But the goal here is that by KubeCon London, so less than a month away, not a ton of time, we want to have a realistic and concrete proof of concept in people's hands so that people can use it. They can try it out. They can see what this V2 experience is really like, and get some real honest feedback on it. I want to stress here that there is plenty of open discussion in the proposal still. So this POC is, we are taking action on building something, a prototype that we can all experience and use with the proposal as it's currently stated, but this does not commit us to shipping exactly that. We will take this opportunity to be informed by, okay, we built it this way and people are using it this way, and what we saw here doesn't actually work as well as we wanted it to. So this is going to be a way to inform us, and it is not like this POC is not necessarily this is exactly what's going to ship and no more feedback. Like, no, and if anything, it's an opportunity for more feedback. So we're going to try to have something in everyone's hands for KubeCon London, and obviously that will be released like everywhere. You don't have to be in person in KubeCon London to be able to experience it. We'll make it available for everybody. But we're super excited about this. We're making a lot of progress on it, and if folks want to follow along with progress too, there is a Slack channel, a V2 Slack channel, if folks want to join that too. So any questions on V2 stuff for the POC right now? All right, cool. Then that's the agenda items for the main section that I had. Before we move on to the optional section stuff, did anybody have anything else they wanted to add to agenda, or any announcements or anything like that? All right, then let's move on to the technical discussion side here. John, I think you were here. Do you want to go ahead and introduce this and bring this up?
Yeah, so I'm John. I am new to this meeting, pretty new to Crossplane. I'm also on the Sumo team. Looks like we have four people from my team that are here in this meeting right now, and that's because Sumo is strongly considering investing in Crossplane here. And this issue is one of the main things that we're sort of struggling with as we're trying to move from proof of concept to like real actual adoption and trying to run Crossplane to run our infrastructure, which is substantial. We currently have a lot of stuff in Terraform. And we also have a lot of stuff in sort of a bespoke solution that we built when the cloud was new. And we're trying to migrate off of both of those things and into something that's more Kubernetes native, which is where Crossplane comes in. But we notice one of the things we're losing when we move from Terraform to Crossplane is this ability to see sort of the fan out of a change. So if I make a change to something in my claim and that gets run through a composition and it renders out 3 different managed resources, right? And my change to the claim causes a diff in those 3 managed resources. I can't currently see what that diff is going to be before I go ahead and commit. So there's value for us in some kind of ability to see that. And there's been this longstanding issue. It's been open since I think 2020 about the ability to have a dry run. Whether that's something that lives inside the server and provides a dry run and spits out a diff at the end and says, here's what would change if you actually committed this change, or there's something that lives on the CLI locally where I get kind of building on top of Crossplane render. Maybe that takes my managed resource and runs it through the composition pipeline, spits out what it thinks it's going to be, and then diffs that against the live state. Because I know that the Crossplane CLI can already reach into the cluster and talk to it. So some kind of ability for us to see an enumeration of what's going to change, and to make sure that. So for our case, we're doing a bunch of imports, right? Because we have all this pre-existing infrastructure in AWS. So we need to be able to go from observe mode in management policy to ownership mode. But we want to make sure that when we flip that switch, that everything that we have expressed in managed resources or in our claims through the composition pipeline actually lines up with what's there. So we want to make sure we're not actually making any changes when we go into managed mode, because we don't want those changes right now. We need the ability to confirm that that's not actually going to change stuff for us and figure out what the diff would be so we can go back and rectify the diff on the code side before it gets applied. So this is, I wanted to bring this up in this meeting among a bunch of people who know what they're talking about to figure out what maybe the best way to approach something like a dry run would be, or maybe if we're thinking about this wrong and you guys have better advice, I would be happy to hear it.
Yeah, I have one thing that I can add to this, and I think I saw DeLorean, you're in the call, right? Yeah, DeLorean's here. So DeLorean, we're from Upbound, and we did migration as well from a bunch of Terraform to Crossplane. And one of the things that DeLorean did, which I thought was a pretty good idea, and I think would help here, is in your provider config, if you use a service account that only has read access, don't grant it anything else, then when you flip the switch, you'll see like that it should be able to, it won't, that it won't be able to create anything, and you'll be able to see if there's like any errors in any of the statuses. And so it's kind of like a super, it is kind of like a poor man's way of doing it, but it is one step closer, I guess, is what you can achieve with that. And I don't know, Delory, if you have any other points on that.
Yeah, yeah, it was so funny you were mentioning that, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm triggered. But yeah, it's very tedious, but it was like I wanted to make sure that our production resources weren't gonna be affected. So that's why I chose that way. But I do understand and realize that it's, not scalable and it is very tedious and time consuming. But I mean, if you're paranoid like me, there was no other option. So
Eric, did you have more to add to that? You got your hand up.
Yeah, one of the things, because this, like John brought up, this was a concern that we had. And for those providers that leverage Terraform, I had thought about creating a solution where, you could, essentially either use a CLI or have another command to the API to generate a diff. So like if you had a flag when you went to apply, to generate a diff before you applied as kind of a dry run, just like your Terraform plan, which could kick off like a Terraform plan. So I had that as an idea for the providers that are generated from Terraform and that are using obviously Terraform under the hood. For those providers that aren't, that would be, I think, a magnitude more complicated. But at least for the ones that are using Terraform, outputting, what Terraform's doing under the hood, I feel would be an elegant solution. And I'd be happy to contribute that.
Yeah, one of the things I kind of wanted to explore here, because this, John, as you mentioned, right, this is an issue that has been open for a very long time, right? It's like we had this idea, but it was just very incompatible with the, the eventually consistent, loosely coupled sort of model of Kubernetes, right? There just isn't really a obvious, natural, clear place to insert this functionality in and have it be an experience you would expect with Kubernetes. So we struggled with it for quite a long time, and really didn't get to a place where we could do anything about it. So one of the things I want to hear from you all is that we kind of took the pressure, like a little bit of pressure off ourselves from a Crossplane maintainer perspective when we built composition functions and the render tooling because before we had that, like there wasn't really a way at all to get a sense of what your code or your logic in a composition would do without applying it to the cluster and seeing what happened, right? So that render ability was a big step forward. And then also, as you mentioned too, John, like observe only resources. You can put all these resources into observe only mode so they won't do any write changes or create any resources on the cloud side. So I would love to hear like a little bit more where those two kind of areas to attack this fall short for you all. You kind of referenced it, but I'd love to hear a little bit more of like, render, where does that fall short for you for understanding like what a change to your claim will do? And then observe only resources, kind of where does that fall short from kind of having some ability to see, okay, cool, these are resources and I would know they won't do anything, so I have some safety there.
Yeah. So as far as where render falls short, render is a great step in the direction that we're trying to go. And actually, I just made a contribution to Helm unit test this week to add post renderer support to their assertion framework, so that we can take crossplane render and pipe it after the Helm run happens in Helm unit test, so you can actually assert on the results that come out of render. So we've been working heavily with render. And it's very useful, but there is some like cluster contextual stuff, right? That right now is a manual effort for somebody to go dig into the cluster, figure out what environment configs am I using for this? What other external resources do I need to pull down and plumb in so that things are accurate, right? So it seems like the kind of the next natural evolution of render, given that the crossplane CLI can already reach out to the cluster, would be to have something where it can go out and use already the internal logic in Crossplane to go and look up, what environment configs can I find in this cluster that would apply here, and what other resources are being pulled in that I can look up that I can apply here in this context, and then just sort of run that diff, right? That's the baseline level of functionality for this, is just like do your best to tell me what's going to change. It's like the mental model that I have. You're talking about like doing this in a Kubernetes native way, is Argo. Argo has the sort of baked in ability, right, to when you ask it CLI for a diff of this thing, it can spit out like what your currently applied state is versus what your local state is, or a different branch or something like that. And it can tell you by doing sort of a dry run compute, like, all right, here's what's going to change when you click the sync button. So that's kind of our mental model going forward for this. And I know obviously you guys don't have the same sort of like reconciliation controller loops, right? That Argo does. You don't keep desired state separate from actual state in kind of the way that Argo is meant to do that statefully. But we can certainly take some inspiration from their the Argo diff commands that you have in the CLI, where it actually does reach into the cluster and tries to tell you what's going to change if you apply this, which is really at the end of the day, like I want to be able to validate when I make a pull request, right? That like this is the stuff that's going to change, like where the rubber hits the road. That's really our use case. And as far as the observe resources stuff, we're in the process of, like I said, a proof of concept. And one of those things that we're trying to accomplish is like paving that migration pathway for onboarding stuff. And right now we have kind of baked in this idea of I'm going to have a composition that has two modes. One of them is a managed mode and the other one is an unmanaged mode. And when it's unmanaged, we're going to have it's going to be in observe mode. And we haven't, I guess, gone super far down the pathway of actually trying to grab those resources and then manage them, because we're kind of still in that proof of concept phase. But the the semantics aren't exactly clear to us from the documentation and from our usage so far of what exactly happens when I have something that's in observe mode and then I start passing fields to it. The documentation has warnings that say if you pass actual desired state under for provider to this thing, it's Crossplane will assert those things. And so we've been really hesitant to try and fill in the for provider in order to try and get a diff between for provider and at provider when you're in observe mode. So we haven't gone super far down that pathway. But it seemed like the PR time stuff was something that was going to serve our requirement maybe a little better. And so surface this issue.
Yeah, that's really helpful, John. So thanks for taking the time to explain all of that there. And and it kind of highlights too, like this is such a broad problem that has a just a breadth of areas where it could be attacked to make improvements or to help out here. So it's good to hear about all this stuff, and and it's also very clear too that this is something that it comes up a lot, right? Like at most KubeCons, people ask about it, like, hey, what about dry run, or dry run is a blocker? So it's not something you guys aren't all by yourself of like asking for this and nobody else cares about it, right? Like this is something we've heard before for sure. So yeah, there's some of the ideas I like here for sure. Like I kind of like some of the concepts, especially around enhancing some of the CLI tooling to make it like easier ergonomics there to get realistic results out of it. Because it is kind of tedious now of like, okay, cool, I got this composition and I can run render on it. I want to make some changes on it, but what is that going to do in the real world? Okay, well, I got to find these extra resources. I got to find these environment configs. I got to get these all together. And it is fairly tedious. It's possible, but like, it's not easy. So it's difficult to get a realistic perspective of what a change is going to do before you do it. So that's a good point to bring up. And I would, some improvement there certainly would go a long way. Bob, you want to add something to that? You're off mute.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least from our perspective, one of the deficiencies in render right now is the inability to handle nested composites, right? I mean, it will give you that rendering of the top level composition and the top level composite and what it's going to do, but at least in our scenarios, we often go down multiple levels of nested compositions, and so we'd really like it. In order to get that view of what is this change actually going to do, you really need to step through and render all of the sub composites, to get down to the managed resource level and really identify what's going to happen. And I think that probably goes hand in hand with, talking to the live cluster, right? I mean, realistically, I don't think from the CLI command line, you want to have to give it all of the XR, all of the compositions and all of the, all of the stuff, right? You want to be able to just give it, hey, take this thing, go talk to this cluster and tell me what would happen, right? So, I mean, I think that's probably a big step, right? I mean, it's not trivial to handle the nested case. And maybe real-time compositions helps with that somehow, or maybe not. But at least from our perspective, yeah, I agree that, render is great and we use it all the time, but I think making it support nested compositions, nested composites, and having that full view of what it's going to do would be a huge step forward.
Yeah, there's always going to be a DAG problem here, right?
Right.
There's always going to be a dependency graph problem, and you can see it in Terraform if you've ever spent any time in Terraform, where if you create something that depends on something else that doesn't exist yet, Terraform will propagate all the fields as like known after apply. Right.
Yep.
Like, I don't know what the ID of this thing is. I understand that you want the two things to be referential, right? But I don't know what the ID of that thing is, and so I can't tell you what it's going to be. So there's that concept of like dirtiness in the sort of referential integrity that is going to have to be propagated if you start with like, hey, I have this claim. What happens? What comes out if I spit out this claim? Right. I have I have a role that gets created in Amazon when I claim this role, and then that thing downstream is going to create me a service account that has a link to that role in Kubernetes. But I don't know what the ARN of the role is going to be, right? When I try and put it as the URSA annotation on the service account. I can't tell you what that is because I don't know because it doesn't have an ARN yet. So the idea of being able to sort of propagate that unknownness through those composition pipelines is something that we're going to have to tackle. But having an answer that says, I don't know what it's going to be yet is still better than not having an answer.
Right.
Yep. I think those are all pretty good points here. Yes, I think like it's hard to tell what should and what could progress be made on right now. So one of the things that could be useful here is in contributing, and John and Eric and team, have you all already added some of your ideas to the dry run issue, or is this like kind of the first discussion you're having about it in this community meeting and you haven't written it down yet?
No, we haven't written down. Well, oh,
Yeah,
John,
we haven't written this stuff
Sorry, my
down.
bad.
We figured there's been a lot of discussion about this. It's been open for a long time, so you guys have probably already thought about it. So I didn't want to come in and just sort of repeat what people have already said that maybe wasn't a good idea for whatever reason. I kind of wanted to come straight to the source, right, and see what you guys have thought about and what you've maybe thought about trying, and where it stood up and where it fell down. Because if it's been open for 4 years, right, you guys have thought about it a great deal, and I wanted to see what your implementation recommendations might be if we were to do something like this.
Yeah. So I think there are some what I could see possibly happening is like there being some incremental progress, on like in improving some of the render stuff, making it be able to do a more complete picture from like, nested composite resources, and being able to more easily extract like production data or diff against a live cluster, all those sort of things. Like those are some incremental things that I can see progress being made on. I think it would be a challenge to have like a holistic, unified, grand vision, deep design may have significant progress made on it in the near term. So I don't have a great answer for that of like, yep, this is the grand vision for dry run and this is how it'll work. It's kind of like, oh yeah, but we've tackled it in certain places and there's incremental ideas, and like, yeah, the big picture there is honestly kind of missing still of what's the best thing to do, the ideal state to achieve.
Yeah. Well, so you've got the V2 issues open now, right? And so maybe this is one of those things that gets thought about in that grand V2 design of like, how do we make it easy for us to do this? Obviously we can make incremental progress in V1 in whatever ways make sense. But just to surface this.
Yeah, that is, and that's possible, John. One of the core tenets of V2 is like, hey, what are the things that we really want to change that are holding the Crossplane project back that will be painful to change, or we feel like we've been stuck with for a long time. So just because a feature has like a grand scope or it's a big thing doesn't necessarily mean it's a V2, but like, yeah, like if V2 makes it like impossible or something, then that's certainly a constraint to consider in that context for sure. But things could be done. It could be done in V1. If they're add-on features that don't necessarily like change the resource model of Crossplane. So yeah, so all this to say that John and team, like you guys, you are welcome to add some of your ideas here, like what's kind of important for you all, what's sort of some of your needs. Like, we've kind of discussed it today here a little bit. Having it written down in the issue there is absolutely welcome. You guys are encouraged to do so for sure. And anything else that folks want to add while we're on the topic for dry run? All right, I think that's everything that we had on the agenda here then. So if there's not more that folks want to get into right now, then I think we can go ahead and call it for this week. But thanks a lot for everyone bringing their ideas and their enthusiasm, and the Sumo Logic guys. Thanks for you all for coming in with your passion to this, and excited to see you guys around more often too.
Yeah, we'll be
All right,
here.
thanks everybody. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.